The air inside the room had changed. What had begun as a simple visit now felt heavy, charged, as though every breath carried the weight of what had been spoken. Claire stood near the window, her arms wrapped around herself, her gaze fixed on the golden light spilling across the yard. She could hear Ethan behind her, silent but present. His very nearness pressing on her like an invisible gravity. Her heart pounded, an uneven rhythm that betrayed her calm exterior. She was a mother, a protector, a woman who had lived through a marriage, a divorce, and years of carrying responsibility alone. She knew better than to let emotions lead her astray. And yet, part of her felt alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. She turned slightly, her voice soft but firm. "Ethan, this can happen. Whatever you think you're feeling, it isn't real. It's confusion. You're young. You're trying to find your place. And I'm not the one you should be turning to." Ethan's jaw tightened. His eyes shadowed with a pain that seemed too deep for someone his age. "It is real, Claire. I know it is. I can't explain it, but when I'm around you, I don't feel like I'm failing. I don't feel like I have to chase something I'll never catch. I feel like I'm home." The word home pierced through her, making her chest ache. She closed her eyes, her hands trembling against her arms. How long had it been since she had felt like someone saw her as more than a caretaker, more than a woman defined by her daughter's accomplishments or her ex-husband's absence? Ethan's words filled a space in her that had been empty for so long it almost frightened her to feel it again, but she couldn't let herself fall. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I've spent too many years trying to hold my family together. Too many nights wondering what went wrong in my own marriage. And I won't." Her throat tightened as tears threatened to rise. "I won't let myself make a mistake that could destroy Lily." He stepped closer, his movements slow, careful, like someone approaching a fragile piece of glass. "You wouldn't destroy her. I'm not saying we should act on this. I needed you to know, to hear the truth from me." Claire turned to face him then, her eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Ethan? You've put me in a position I should never have to face. You've made me feel something I can't afford to feel." His eyes softened, his own pain evident. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just couldn't keep pretending anymore." For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the ticking clock and the faint rustle of leaves outside. Claire studied him, this young man with two honest eyes and a heart that beat louder than his own good sense. She saw his sincerity, his longing, his need to be understood. And she also saw the danger of it, the line that must never be crossed. She shook her head slowly. "You need to figure out what you really want with Lily. She deserves all of you, Ethan, not pieces, not secrets. If you can't give her that, then you shouldn't be with her. And as for me, I can't be part of this." Her words felt like knives cutting against her own heart. But she knew they had to be said. Ethan's eyes lingered on her, filled with something unspoken regret, longing, perhaps even love. He opened his mouth as if to argue, but then closed it, his shoulders sagging with resignation. Slowly he stepped back, his hands falling to his sides. "Goodbye, Claire," he murmured, his voice heavy with the weight of what would remain unsaid. She nodded, unable to speak. She watched as he turned, walked to the door, and paused just long enough to glance back at her. For a fleeting second their eyes met, hers brimming with conflict, his filled with a sorrow that seemed far older than his years. Then he opened the door and stepped out into the fading light of day. The sound of the door clicking shut echoed in the stillness of the house. Claire stood frozen, her heart racing, her hands shaking. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes as tears finally slipped down her cheeks. Nothing had happened. Not really. No lines had been crossed beyond words and the briefest touch. And yet everything had changed. Because now, every time she saw Ethan with her daughter, she would remember the truth he had spoken, the truth that had shaken her to her core. She pressed her palms against her face, whispering to herself like a prayer, "This has to stay buried. For Lily's sake, for mine." But deep down in the quiet corners of her heart, she knew the truth could never fully be buried. It would live there, a silent echo. a dangerous longing that would follow her into every glance, every memory, every unguarded moment. And as Claire stood alone in her living room, she realized that sometimes the hardest choices weren't between right and wrong, but between what your heart longed for and what your soul knew you could never have. The words hung between them, simple yet weighted. Claire blinked, caught off guard. Her throat tightened before she found her voice. I, I suppose that's because I've lived long enough to know when someone needs to be heard. But he shook his head gently. No, it's more than that. With you, I don't feel like I have to pretend. I don't feel judged. I just feel understood. Claire swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay composed. She reminded herself who he was, her daughter's boyfriend, the young man who should be talking about Lily, not her. And yet, the sincerity in his tone struck a chord she hadn't expected for years. She had been the listener, the caretaker, the one people leaned on. Rarely had anyone looked at her the way Ethan did now, as if she were more than just Lily's mom or someone's ex-wife. For a brief, dangerous moment, she felt seen. She tried to smile, to lighten the moment. Careful, Ethan. If you keep talking like that, I might start believing I'm wiser than I really am. But Ethan didn't laugh. His gaze lingered, steady and unflinching. Maybe you should believe it, he said quietly. Her heart stumbled in her chest. She broke the eye contact, reaching for her mug even though it had gone cold. She took a sip anyway, just to give herself a reason to look away. The room felt warmer now, though the air hadn't changed. Claire could sense something shifting, something she couldn't quite name. She wanted to redirect the conversation, to guide it back to safer ground. But before she could, Ethan spoke again. "Can I tell you something?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Claire nodded slowly, unsure if she wanted to hear it, but unable to say no. Ethan set his cup down, his hands trembling slightly. He looked at her as though he was standing on the edge of something he couldn't turn back from. And then, with a breath that seemed to shake through him, Ethan said something that would change everything. Claire thought she knew about his visit. The living room seemed to shrink as Ethan sat there, his hands gripping the edge of his coffee mug as though it were the only thing keeping him grounded. Claire could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the soft ticking of the wall clock, even the sound of her own breathing. Time felt stretched, suspended in the weight of the moment. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes holding hers in a way that felt uncomfortably steady. His voice, when it came, was soft but sure. "Claire, I think I came here today not just to see Lily. I think I came here because of you." The words struck her like a sudden gust of wind. Claire blinked, her mind scrambling for sense. Surely she had misheard. Surely he couldn't mean what it sounded like. But the raw intensity in his gray eyes told her otherwise. Her throat tightened. "Ethan, what are you saying?" He swallowed his Adam's apple, bobbing. "I mean that I feel something when I'm with you. Something I don't even know how to explain. It's different. It's steady. It feels—" Claire's chest constricted. She set her mug down quickly, afraid her trembling hands might betray her. She rose from the sofa, needing movement. Space, anything to put distance between herself and the storm brewing in those words. "Ethan, stop," she said firmly, though her voice trembled. "You can't say things like that. I'm Lily's mother." "I know," he said, almost desperately, standing now too. His height suddenly made him seem older, less like the boy who had first come through her door months ago. "I know who you are. That's why I've been fighting it. But the truth is, when I'm around you, I don't feel lost. You listen to me. You understand me in ways no one else does. I can't just ignore that." Claire turned away, pressing a hand against her chest as though she could calm the storm inside her. This was wrong. Every part of her screamed it. And yet, beneath the shock, there was something else. A stirring. A recognition she didn't want to admit. Because hadn't she felt it too? That flicker of warmth when his eyes lingered too long. The way her heart had quickened at his words earlier, calling her easy to talk to. She had pushed it aside, told herself it was just kindness, just loneliness playing tricks on her. But now, hearing him say it out loud, the truth pressed against her heart with a dangerous clarity. She spun back to face him, her eyes flashing. "Do you realize what you're saying? Do you know what this would do to Lily if she ever even suspected? I'm not trying to hurt her." Ethan's voice cracked, and he stepped closer, his hands raised as if to plead with her. "I care about Lily. I do. But what I feel when I'm with her, it doesn't compare to what I feel when I'm here talking to you. It's like I've been pretending with her, trying to be the man she wants while with you. I can just be myself." Claire's breath caught. His words echoed in her chest like a dangerous melody. She wanted to shut him down, to remind him of the boundaries that could never, ever be crossed. But part of her deep, hidden aching was listening. And that terrified her most of all. Her voice softened, trembling with the conflict inside her. "Ethan, you're confused. You're young, and you're looking for something solid to hold on to. I happen to be here, older, steadier. That doesn't mean this is real." But Ethan shook his head, his expression resolute. "No, this is real. I've never been more certain of anything." And then, before she could move, he reached out. His fingers brushed against hers, just the lightest touch, but enough to send a jolt through her body. The contact was innocent, fleeting, yet it carried more weight than any embrace she had felt in years. Claire's breath shuddered. She pulled her hand back quickly, clutching it to her chest like it had been burned. "Don't," she whispered, her voice breaking. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air was thick, heavy with words that could never be unsaid. Claire turned away, staring at the window where the sunlight had shifted into late afternoon gold. She felt trapped between duty and desire, between the role of mother and the ache of a woman who had been unseen for far too long. Ethan's voice broke the silence. Softer this time, filled with sorrow. "I didn't come here to make things harder. I couldn't keep it in anymore. Pretending was eating me alive." Claire closed her eyes, her heart pounding. She wanted to scream, to tell him to leave, to shut the door on this madness. But another part of her lonely, vulnerable, human longed to turn and say she understood, that she felt it too. Instead, she forced her voice steady. "You should go, Ethan, before this goes any further." But he didn't move right away. His eyes lingered on her, searching, pleading. And in that look, Claire saw everything she had been missing, the desire to be truly seen, the longing for connection, the hunger to feel alive again. She swallowed hard, her body rigid. She couldn't give in. She wouldn't. But deep down, she already knew nothing would ever be the same again. And as Ethan stood there, torn between leaving and staying, Claire realized she was facing a choice that could alter not just her life, but her daughter's as well. The house was unusually quiet that Saturday afternoon. Claire Adams had spent most of the morning folding laundry, dusting shelves, and straightening up the living room that always seemed to gather more clutter than she could manage. She wasn't expecting visitors, and honestly, she welcomed the silence. At 46, recently divorced, she had learned to find comfort in the small, ordinary rhythms of life, sweeping the floors, brewing a pot of coffee, listening to the faint hum of the neighborhood outside. But the quiet was interrupted by the sharp sound of the doorbell. Claire paused, wiping her hands on her apron, a little surprised. She hadn't ordered anything online, and her neighbors usually called before dropping by. She walked to the door, her heart beating in that odd way it does when something unexpected happens. When she opened it, she froze for a moment. Standing there was Ethan Parker, her daughter Lily's boyfriend. Ethan was 23, tall with a slightly awkward charm, the kind of young man who always seemed polite but never fully comfortable in his own skin. His brown hair fell across his forehead, and his gray eyes, usually bright whenever Lily was around, looked heavier today, carrying a weight Claire didn't recognize high. "Mrs. Adams," he said, shifting from one foot to the other. "Is Lily home?" Claire hesitated, blinking at him. She had almost forgotten Lily was away for the weekend, visiting a friend in Seattle. She had left that very morning, suitcase in hand, kissing Claire on the cheek before rushing out the door. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she finally replied, her voice gentle. "Lily left early this morning. She won't be back until Monday." "Oh," he said softly. His shoulders slumped just a little, and for a second Claire thought he might turn and leave. But instead, he lingered there, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket as though he didn't quite know what to do with himself. Claire tilted her head. "Did you want me to tell her you stopped by?" There was a pause. He let out a small breath, then shook his head. "No, it's not that. I don't know. I guess I really needed to talk to someone today." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the confident way he usually spoke when he was with Lily. There was something vulnerable in his tone, something that made him look younger than he was. Claire hesitated. She knew it wasn't quite proper. He was her daughter's boyfriend, after all. If Lily knew he was here without her, she might think it strange. But Claire also knew what loneliness felt like, the kind that pressed in on you even when the sun was shining. And in that moment, she saw that same kind of loneliness reflected in Ethan's face. She stepped aside. "Come in, then. It's chilly out there." He nodded gratefully, brushing past her with a faint smile. The air inside the house smelled of fresh coffee and lemon-scented polish. Ethan took a seat on the sofa, looking oddly nervous, though he wasn't sure if he belonged there. Claire went to the kitchen and poured them both a cup of coffee. When she returned, she placed a steaming mug in front of him. He accepted it with a soft thank you, his fingers curling around the warmth as though it were the only thing steadying him. For a while, they talked about nothing in particular, the weather, the bookstore where he worked, Lily's love for planning every detail of her trips. But Claire noticed how his words didn't carry the usual spark. His sentences trailed off, and his gaze often wandered, as if he were somewhere far away. Finally, he sighed and leaned back against the couch. "You know, sometimes it feels like Lily's living in a whole different world than me. She's always got these big plans, always moving so fast. And I'm just not like that." Claire listened, her brow furrowed slightly. She didn't expect to hear this from him. She had always assumed Ethan adored Lily, that everything between them was simple and sweet. But now, watching the way he spoke, she realized there was more beneath the surface. "You know, Etha," she said softly, "it's normal to feel that way sometimes. People can be very different and still care about each other." He looked at her, and for a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes, a kind of relief, maybe, or perhaps gratitude. Then he smiled faintly. "You're easy to talk to, Mrs. Adams. Easier than anyone else." Claire's chest tightened unexpectedly. She wasn't sure why those words touched her the way they did. She reminded herself quickly that this was Ethan, her daughter's boyfriend. But the way he said it, with such raw honesty, stirred something deep inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She took a sip of her coffee, trying to steady herself. It was probably nothing. He was just being kind. Just a young man who needed someone to listen. That was all. But still, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more beneath his words. Something unspoken that lingered in the room with them, as the clock ticked softly on the wall. Claire realized that this unexpected visit was not going to be like any other, and what Ethan was about to confess would change everything she thought she knew about him, and about herself. The afternoon light slanted through the living room curtains, painting warm streaks across the carpet. Claire sat opposite Ethan, her mug of coffee cooling in her hands. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't entirely easy either. It had weight, like something waiting to be spoken. She watched him as he stared into his cup, his fingers tapping gently against the ceramic as if keeping time with thoughts he didn't yet know how to voice. There was a heaviness in his shoulders that didn't belong on someone his age. 23 should be filled with plans, laughter, and excitement for the future. But Ethan looked like a man carrying something far heavier than books from the shop he worked at. Claire finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "You seem restless, Ethan. Is everything all right?" His head lifted slowly. For a second, she thought he might brush it off with a quick smile, the way young men often did when they didn't want to reveal too much. But then his gray eyes met hers, and the wall she expected him to build just wasn't there. "I don't know, Mrs. Adams," he said, his voice low, almost defeated. "Sometimes it feels like I don't belong in Lily's world, like I'm always 2 steps behind her." Claire tilted her head. "Behind her? What do you mean?" Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His words came slowly, carefully, as though each one weighed more than the last. She's got this fire in her, always chasing something, always planning the next big thing. Graduate school, internships, moving to bigger cities, meeting people who seem so much more like her. And me, I'm just this guy who likes quiet things. Working at the bookstore, reading in the evenings, staying close to home. Sometimes I wonder if she's already outgrowing me. His honesty stunned Claire. She had never heard a young man speak with such raw vulnerability, especially about her daughter. Most of the time, people tried to impress parents, to show them only the strongest, most polished version of themselves. But Ethan was offering her the cracks, the doubts, the things he probably wouldn't dare say to Lily herself. Claire's heart softened. She knew what it felt like to be left behind. She remembered her own marriage, how her ex-husband had always been racing toward bigger deals, greater successes, while she stayed home, raising their daughter, tending the house. Over time, she had felt invisible. She saw a shadow of her own past in Ethan's words, and it tugged at her in a way she hadn't expected. Different doesn't always mean wrong, she said gently. Sometimes the balance between two people is what makes it work. One dreamer, one steady hand. Ethan gave a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. He swirled his coffee absently, watching the liquid ripple. I tell myself that sometimes. But then I see her talking about the future, about all the places she wants to go. And I wonder if she'll even want me standing next to her when she gets there. The ache in his voice made Claire's chest tighten. She wanted to comfort him, to remind him of the things Lily had told her. The way Lily often gushed about how thoughtful Ethan was, how safe she felt with him. But something in his tone told her he wasn't looking for reassurance about Lily. He was searching for something deeper, something he hadn't named yet. She placed her cup on the table, leaning in slightly. You know, Ethan, it takes courage to admit you're afraid of losing someone. Most people hide those fears until it's too late. His eyes lifted again, meeting hers. This time, the look in them startled her. It wasn't the usual politeness of a young man speaking to his girlfriend's mother. It was searching, vulnerable, and something else. Something that made Claire's pulse quicken unexpectedly. You're easy to talk to, Mrs. Adams, he said softly.